And let's take a look at Chapter 2. It's named Some Tools of the Economist. And the quote at the beginning of the chapter, it's by Milton and Rose Friedman. So Rose is his wife. And it comes from a book titled Free to Choose. And the book was written, and then the videos came along to go with the book. So the book's just a small paperback. If you like reading about economic topics, it's not a bad book. So, and it's not a technical book or anything like that. It's not full of graphs or anything complicated. So, anyway, he said the key insight of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations is misleadingly simple. If an exchange between two parties is voluntary, it will not take place unless both believe they will benefit from it. Most economic fallacies derive from the neglect of this simple insight, from the tendency to assume that there's a fixed pie, that one party can gain only at the expense of another. So basically what he's saying there is the economy is not a zero-sum game. So you can gain and it not be at the expense of others. Chapter starts out talking about opportunity cost. We talked some about that last time also. That's a really important concept in economics, and it's important that you understand opportunity cost. Does anybody remember that definition from last time? That's exactly it. The highest valued thing, the highest valued alternative that you have to give up when you make a decision, right? So it's not always a monetary value. Sometimes it can be, television's a good example. So when you choose to watch a particular show on television, you have to give up the second show that you would have watched when you made that decision, right? A lot of people on Sunday afternoon. Anybody watch football? Yeah. So there may be several games that you want to see, but they're at the same time sometimes, right? So you have to pick which game you'd like to see, right? So that's an opportunity cost. When my sons were little, they're both grown now, but they're both in their 20s. But when they were little, we'd go to Walmart. They'd always want a Hot Wheel, and I'd tell them, you can have one. So say they picked out a red sports car and a black pickup. If they choose the black pickup, they don't get the red sports car. That's the opportunity cost. If they choose the red sports car, you don't get the black pickup. That's the opportunity cost, right? It's the second item that you would have selected if you'd not made the decision that you did. On page 20, the text talks about opportunity cost in the real world. Talks about the cost of attending college. What's the largest cost in attending college, though? What about opportunity cost? Include those. Since you're in class all day, what are you not doing? Working at a job, right? So what's the opportunity cost of going to college? You're not working at a job. Yep, that's exactly it. You're not working at a job, right? So especially if you're just looking at the tuition at a community college, the big cost is not tuition and books and fees. It's you're spending your time here going to school as opposed to working. So that lost income from not working, right? Now if you're going to Harvard or something, You know, maybe the tuition is the bigger expense, but for those of us that aren't at Harvard, you know, the opportunity cost is generally greater than the actual cost because you have lost earnings. And so that's a way to look at things. So that's an economic way of looking at things. Always consider those opportunity costs. And you'll see a picture there on page 20 of LeBron James, and he evidently understood opportunity cost. Because what was everybody knows he's a basketball player, but what was unique about his career? Yep, he went straight from high school into the NBA. He skipped college. Why? Well, those were some of the best playing and earning years of his life, and he thought he could go to college later, after he retires from the NBA. And so, not everyone gets to do that, but it tells you there that he got a 3-year contract worth $13 million. So, there would be an opportunity cost involved in him going to college and then going to the NBA, right? So these opportunity costs are important to consider. I always like to go through the outstanding economist sections in each chapter. There's one in each chapter. For this chapter, it's Thomas Sowell. Some of the free-to-choose videos by Milton Friedman that we watch, there's a panel discussion at the end of those, and frequently Thomas Sowell is there in that panel discussion. So he's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, recognizes the critical importance of the institutions or the rules of the game that shape human interactions. And that's what we'll talk about some today, is the rules of the game. His book, Knowledge and Decision, stresses the role of knowledge in the economy and how different institutional arrangements compare at using scarce information. He's the author of many books and journal articles and writes a nationally syndicated column that appears in more than 150 newspapers. And he also writes on a wide variety of topics. So, if you come across that name in a newspaper or something and you like reading about economic topics, he's a good person to read. So, trade creates values, and it goes through a couple of reasons why trade creates value. One, when individuals engage in a voluntary exchange, both parties are made better off. And two, by channeling goods and resources to those who value them most, trade creates value and increases the wealth created by society's resources. So let's look at the first one. It's on page 21. Number one, when individuals engage in a voluntary exchange, they're both made better off. And it gives you an example of Janet and Brad, and it tells you that they value onions and tomatoes differently, right? And I don't remember which one likes tomatoes. Let's see, Janet likes tomatoes better than onions, and Brad likes onions. So they each have a salad. One of them looks at the other one and says, "Would you like to trade your onions for my tomatoes?" And since one of them likes onions and the other one likes tomatoes, what do? They trade, a voluntary exchange, right? And so that's some of what Friedman was talking about in that quote at the beginning of the chapter. Exchanges that are voluntary, both people in the exchange are made better off. If you wouldn't be better off when you're asked, would you like to trade this for that, what would you say? No, thank you. It's a voluntary exchange, right? You don't have to do it. It's voluntary. So if you like tomatoes better than onions, you'll make the exchange. If not, just say, no, thank you. I like what I have. And so, if an exchange is voluntary, both people are made better off by the exchange. The second topic on page 22, by channeling goods and resources to those who value them most, trade creates value and increases the wealth created by society's resources. So, again, the big point there is that trade creates value. The resources go to those who value them the most. So that's an important concept, and we'll come across this again later, as opposed to trades creating value. Some forms of government, the rationing system is different than we have here, where we have markets. And so we'll discuss that later on. Transaction cost. We all know there's transaction cost involved when you make trade sometimes. The middleman is a cost reducer. Well, sometimes you might think that middlemen increase cost, but they can also reduce cost. And why is that? Well, the example they go through is the grocery store. Aren't they a middleman between you and the farmer? So let's say that there is no grocery store and you don't have anything to cook at home. You get off at 5 o'clock and say, I'd like something to eat. You have to drive out in the country somewhere and find a farmer. And you have to find several different types of farmers possibly. And then if you want some meat to go with your fruits and vegetables that you get from the farmer, then you've got to go find a rancher or someone who raises chickens or whatever you might want. That's going to take you all evening, isn't it? And what has the grocer done for you in his job as a middleman? Yeah, he made it convenient by bringing everything to one place for you, right? Yeah. And even if it's the same price, is it cheaper that way when you consider all the cost? So what's the biggest cost that you would be involved in you gathering it all up yourself? Time. Y'all got it. Time, right? Which is what type of cost? We just talked about it. The opportunity cost, right? Isn't there something you'd rather be doing than trying to gather up supper from several different locations? So reduces your opportunity cost to the fact that there's a middleman there. Property rights are really important, and there's three major properties to property rights, or three things that are involved there. They're listed in the middle of page 23. Number one, the right to exclusive use of the property. That is, the owner has sole possession, control, and use of the property, including the right to exclude others. Number two, legal protection against invasion from other individuals who would seek to use or abuse the property without the owner's permission. And number three, the right to transfer, sell, exchange, or mortgage the property. And so those are things that you need to understand property rights. If something belongs to you, here in the U.S. anyway, you're free to do what you'd like to do with that property, right? You can sell it, mortgage it, whatever you'd like to do. Can someone come and take it away from you? No, no, it belongs to you. And um, you can use the property any way that you see fit, right? Within limits. In most cities, there's municipal code, so you can't put some types of businesses in certain areas and things along that line. But other than that, it's yours to. Yep, that's it. Yeah, a liquor store next to an elementary school or something like that, or if it's a really, really, really nice neighborhood, you can't buy the property next door and put in a Fred Sanford style junk dealership or something like that. But other than those types of things, you can use it however you'd like, right? It belongs to you. So those may seem like common sense, but that's the rules of the game, as we spoke about a moment ago. And sometimes these are overlooked. If you look at the former Soviet Union, they overlooked some of those rules of the game. They broke up and they said, we're going to be a capitalist country now. But did they just immediately have a great economy? No. What was the issue? Well, they got the government off of their back to some extent, but did they have property rights in place and things like that? No. So they overlooked these basic things like that. So property rights are really important. Tells you that private owners can gain by employing their resources in ways that are beneficial to others. They bear the opportunity cost of ignoring the wishes of others. So, if you have property, if you're in business, for example, you have to pay attention to what others want. You'll go out of business pretty quick, won't you? Private owners have a strong incentive to care and properly manage what they own. Do people generally take care of things that belong to them? Usually, right? Yeah. You had to pay for it. You had to work to get it. Probably ought to take care of it. So, talks about this back from a college, and the Student Government Association had the idea that there's a long distance between buildings. Wouldn't it be great to have bicycles? And we could just put the bicycles out there on a rack. Students could grab any bicycle, ride it over to the building where their next class is at. So they were able to acquire the funds, get the funds to purchase all these bicycles. But what quickly happened to the bicycles? You can look back there and see. Yeah, who took care of the bicycles? Nobody. Why not? Well, they didn't belong to them. So maybe it's unfortunate that people don't take care of things that don't belong to them, but that's generally what happens. So if it doesn't belong to you, you don't really have to maintain it or anything, or take care of it, right? So that idea didn't live that long. People tore up the bicycles, so they weren't maintained. Private owners have an incentive to conserve for the future, particularly if the property is expected to increase in value. People generally conserve what belongs to them, don't they? It has an application in economics on page 27 about it, protecting endangered species with property rights. When you look at that type of issue, and look at why some things are preserved and others not. It comes back down to property rights. So, used to be bison that roamed the plains. What happened to them? Yep, people just killed them, sold the skins. Why did they kill them all, or close to it? Who did they belong to? They were just roaming the plains out there. So, weren't any property rights. Nobody had them fenced in or anything like that. And so, they're just out there on the plains. So, if you're a buffalo hunter, instead of preserving them, you'd better shoot as many as you can, as fast as you can, before somebody else shoots them, right? Same thing are happening to the fish out in the ocean now. They're being overfished. Who do they belong to? Nobody. So if you're a fisherman, where's your incentive? To manage the population of them, or to catch as many as you can before the next boat catches them. Catch as many as you can before the next boat catches them, right? So, why haven't cattle and chickens and other animals have suffered the same fate? Yeah, they're managed. Why? Yeah, they're owned by somebody, right? It belongs to somebody. So, because they belong to somebody, somebody takes care of them, right? So that's the difference. So those are really important concepts. We talked about last time. A lot of this stuff is common sense when you really think about it, but a lot of economies in the world have failed because they didn't pay attention to these items that are really common sense when you think about them. So, number 4, private owners have an incentive to lower the chance that their property will cause damage to the property of others. Well, has anybody heard about liability? Yep, you're liable if someone gets injured by your property, right? So on page 26, section 2-3A, private ownership and markets. And here it talks about Frederick Hayek. He won the Nobel Prize in 1974 in economics. He also taught at the University of Chicago, but he didn't teach in the economics department. I don't remember what he taught, but he had a lot of similar ideas to the rest of the department at the University of Chicago, but the methodology of economics, they had very much had disagreements on how to carry out the study of economics. So Hayek was an Austrian economist, and they don't really believe in empirical testing, which is what the University of Chicago was, known for their statistical methods and such. So everything was mathematical and statistical, and Hayek's economics was not that much that way. So it was a different approach to how you go about conducting economic research. Anyway, Hayek won the Nobel Prize in economics in 1974. He used the expression the extended order to refer to the tendency for markets to lead perfect strangers from different backgrounds around the world to cooperate with one another. So he wrote a lot about that. And he wrote several good books, and later on in the semester we'll watch a video about Hayek. So anyway, Friedman also talked about the same topic in the video that we watch on Thursday. I believe that's the video where he does this anyway. He'll hold up his pencil and talk about all the different people who cooperated with one another to produce that pencil. So when you think about it, it's rather amazing. So we'll talk about the same thing today, except we've got beef stew to talk about. So right after lunchtime, we'll talk about beef stew. So you can have all that beef stew there, and it's ready in 90 seconds. So isn't the market amazing when you think that people from all over the world probably participated in producing this, and it all heats up in your microwave in 90 seconds and costs just under $2. So, yeah. Oh, sorry. Well, let me move there. Okay. So, it's amazing that all these people came together, produced this product, and you can purchase it for right around $2 and heat it up in your microwave in 90 seconds. So, how many different people might have participated in producing this? Well, it helps a little bit to go to the ingredients, doesn't it? So, start coming up with people who worked on producing this. Farmers, there's a potato farmer, a tomato farmer, a corn farmer, sugarcane farmer. Somebody said something else, I think. Oh, okay. Both of you said sugarcane farmer. Okay. Yep. Salt miner. Yep. A cattle rancher. Right. So the water, you have to think about that. It's not only water, but it's clean water, right? So you've got the, yeah, hopefully. So you've got the water processing plant. They use chemicals there. Someone had to make the chlorine that goes into the water treatment. You had to have skilled people there treating the water so that it's safe to drink. Caramel color, flavoring, carrots, so somebody had to grow those. Beef broth, somebody had to produce that beef broth. Yep, that's exactly right. Somebody had to drive a lot of trucks, didn't they? I saw something a while back and about how many transportation miles are go into the average meal. And if I remember right, I'll have to look it up or something. If it was amazing. If I remember right, they said it was something over 1,000 miles. So that's sounds crazy when you say that, but that's the number that I remember. So someday when I have nothing else to do, I'll get on Google and say, what's the average number of miles of transport in an average meal? So if I remember right, I think that's what they said. So it's something on Discovery Channel or one of those channels I was watching where they talked about that. So what's that? Modern marvels. Okay, that could have been the show I was watching was talking about, the next war will probably not be fought over oil or something like that we think it will, but more than likely water. So. Yep. Right. So those of you at Cumbie, can you hear what people in Paris are saying?
No.
Okay. That's why I keep repeating what you say. And those of you at Cumbie, you feel free to chime in on this at any time that you'd like. So he's talking about all the people who cut down the trees to produce the packaging, people at the pulp mill who process the trees into the paper, people that work on oil rigs and gasoline refineries. What else was it? Right, and transport and the plastics. There's some plastic involved in this. Also, it was a plastic container with a some type of plastic across the top, some type of, I don't know what is the clear plastic sheet across the top. Yeah, film of some type. So, one of the students this morning in class said something that I hadn't thought of, but nutrition facts. There's a nutritionist involved there, right? Yeah. Yep. So somebody had to come up with all of these nutritional facts. We talked about paper, but what's on the paper? Ink. So somebody had to come up with that. Right. Again, whoever produced the microwave. That's exactly right. This is a picture here. So there's a photographer. There's graphic designers. So were there quite a few people involved with producing my lunch the day that I had this? So, that's a lot of different people. And you can ask the question, what motivated all these people to come together to do this? Did the government tell them to do this? No. What led them to do this? Personal profit. The price system did it, right? So there's different ways of organizing an economy. In a communist country, in a socialist country, it may be the case that the government tells people, you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to manage it, and we need so many of these. But countries that have tried that, it's not worked very well for them. They always have a surplus or shortage, and it's usually a shortage. They don't ever have the right number of products. And one thing that Hayek talked about, we just mentioned him, that the information problem there is entirely too complex for a government to manage that. Do they know what I like and what you like and what everyone else out there likes and wants? No, they don't have that information. They don't know what I want for lunch. So they shouldn't try to manage that much details. It's impossible to manage that much information. So the price system brings all these people together. One thing that Friedman says is they're from different countries, different religions, they speak different languages, and if they ever met one another, they may hate one another. But do they still cooperate to produce that product? Yeah, they're still able to come together and work cooperatively to produce this product. So, those of you at Cumbie, did we miss anything that goes into the beef stew?
I don't think so.
Okay, we about got it all, huh? You should always feel free to chime in on these things. So, sometimes the class is rather dynamic, and I know that y'all have to push a button on the microphone, but always feel free to add your 2 cents in it when we talk about these things. And you don't have to raise your hand or anything to do that. Just push the button on your microphone and speak up. So this chapter also talks about the production possibilities curve, and it shows you a picture of one on page 29. And there's some assumptions that are made on the production possibilities curve. And one of those assumptions is there's only 2 products that we're talking about. So the only products we're going to produce are the 2 on this curve, which in the case of this curve is clothing and food. Now, in the real world, we know that we have more than two products, but is there any way to take a two-dimensional graph and put more than two products on it? No, we're kind of limited graphically here, right? So that's one assumption that we're making. We're also going to assume that our technology is fixed and that our resources are fixed at a particular point in time. So if we look at this, you see this line here, and that's the most that can be produced using our existing resources with our existing technology. And so we can produce at any point up to that line. But can we produce outside of it, like at point E? And the answer is no, because that's beyond the resources that we have. Now, we could produce at point D, but why would you? At point D, you can have both more clothing and more food. So if you can have more of both, why not have more of both, right? You can't beat a deal like having more of both, right? So the economy's in a recession or something if you're not producing all that you can, right? So we don't like to produce less than what we're capable of producing. So we can choose different points there. Somebody at Cumbie, what would happen if we chose point S? Could you produce food if you chose to operate at point S? And
Can you repeat that? I couldn't hear you.
Okay. If we chose to produce at point S, how much food could we produce? And since it's just straight up to S and we don't move over vertically, or horizontally any, we don't produce any.
We can't really see the graph.
So we don't.
Would it be 0? We can't all the way see the graph.
Okay. Is it not clear, or I need to zoom in or zoom out, or?
It's not clear. It's pretty blurry. We had the same issue with our English class.
Does that help?
Yes, that helps.
Okay. So if we operate here at point S, you were correct. 0 food there. What about point T? All food and no clothing, right? So what are we likely to produce instead of somewhere on those extremes? Yep, somewhere where there's a happy medium, right? So maybe point A, B, or C. So we're likely to choose to produce at one of those points. And we just talked about different economic systems. In capitalism with a price system, how's that decision made? In the marketplace, people buying and selling, right? Yep, supply and demand. Wherever there's a demand, that's going to be met. The alternative is what? Have the government decide. So the government dictates one of these particular points. So most of us wouldn't like that. We like supply and demand determining these things. So that way we have personal economic freedom, right? Another thing that we've talked about today is opportunity cost, and we can look at this graph in terms of opportunity cost. And let's say that you're at point S. What would be the opportunity cost to moving to point A, from S to A? Yes, making less clothing, right? And looks like a little over 1 unit, is that right? Yeah, that's a little above 1, but it's not as much, yeah, 1 1/4, something like that, 1 1/2. And for that 1 1/2 that you give up as opportunity cost in clothing, what do you get in terms of food? So, looks like right around 3. Does that look right? So, a little hard to read the graph, but yeah, maybe 3, not quite 3, maybe. So, but you should be able to calculate opportunity cost off of this graph, right? And when you look at that graph, what's it shaped like? Not a straight line, is it? Yeah, it's a curved line. And there's a reason for that, and it's called increasing opportunity cost. If you calculate opportunity cost at different points along this line, what you'll find is that as the shape of the slope of the line changes, so does opportunity cost, right? So there's increasing opportunity cost. Why is that? Well, are all resources equally well suited for producing both food and clothing? No. So as you make a little bit of something, you use the best resources for that. Then if you have to make some more of it, you might start using some resources that aren't as well suited for the production of that item as those first resources that you used. So by the time you get to producing all food, instead of trying to using cotton to produce clothing, you're using cotton to somehow produce food. I don't know how you do that, but that's the resource that you have, and you're not using it to produce clothing, which is what it's well suited for, right? So by the time you get to one of these extremes out here, the resources that you're utilizing, they're not really good for what you're using it for. And so you have a tremendous opportunity cost. And so that's what gives this curved line. If it was a straight line, then it would always be equal opportunity cost, and in the real world, we know that's usually not the case. And if it was just a straight line, the opportunity cost would be just the slope of the line. So it's still the slope of the line here, but the slope's always changing, right? In time, we can have economic growth. And what's that look like? Well, the production possibilities curve shifts outward. So from the blue line out to the gold colored, I guess. So in time, our production possibilities curve shifts outward with economic growth. So for some reason, we have more resources, or we've figured out how to better utilize our resources with technology. So if you remember from the first chapter, there's a quote by Thomas Sowell about the cavemen. Anybody remember what he said? Cavemen had the same basic resources that we have today, right? So what was the difference in them and us? Yep, their knowledge about how to utilize it, right? So in time, we have increased technology, and we're better able to utilize the resources that we have to work with. So the result of that is economic growth, or a shifting out to the right on the production possibilities frontier. Some things that could influence that, well, investment in capital goods versus consumer goods, right? Build more plant and equipment. Invest in technology. Advances in technology encourage innovation, encourage inventions. How can you do that? Anybody ever heard of patents? Yeah. So if you invent something and you live here in the US of A, you can get a patent on it, right? And nobody else can produce that for the length of the patent, right? And in the meantime, if it's a good invention, you can make a lot of money. You're protected from all the generic stuff out there that copies your invention, right? So you can make a lot of money in the meantime. Why do we have that? To encourage inventions, right? And some people complain about it and say, well, that person made all this money. Did he take it from somebody else, or did he invent that and create something new? And yeah, he created something new. He didn't take it from someone else. And people may have had to pay a lot for it, but are they required by law to purchase it if they don't want it? That's it. Yeah. Nobody made them pull it off the shelf and swipe their credit card, right? So if you look at other countries that don't encourage innovation with things like patent laws, do you see much invention going on? No. Why? Well, there's no incentive to do it, right? If you did it, there's no patent laws. Either you're immediately subjected to competition, and they didn't incur the research and development costs, so they're going to profit from your invention more than you are, or you're in one of those countries where it belongs to the government, so there's no incentive there. Where did those patent laws, where did that idea get here? Does anybody know? If you've read, if you've read the Constitution lately, it says in the Constitution that we'll have a system of patent and copyright laws. So our founding fathers more than likely had read Adam Smith and knew that we needed incentives built into our economy. So the role of the entrepreneur is important. Talks about creative destruction here. That's an idea originated by Joseph Schumpeter, and he talked a lot about creative destruction. It's the replacement of old products and production methods by innovative new ones that consumers judge to be superior. The process generates economic growth and higher living standards. But in the process of creation, was something destroyed? However, we were doing it, right? So I'll use the example of music. We used to have vinyl records. Anybody remember vinyl records? Seen vinyl records? Yeah, that's what I listened to when I was a kid, was vinyl records. And then we had 8-track tapes, and then cassette tapes, yeah. But what's happened is a new technology comes along. What happens with the old? Yeah, it becomes obsolete. Nobody wants it anymore, right? Then we had cassette tapes, then CDs, and now what's happening to CDs? Yep, they're being phased out by digital, right? So now instead of going to the store and buying a combined package of 15 songs, and you may only like 1 or 2 of the songs on there, you can just get on your cell phone and download the exact song that you want, right? Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, soon maps will be obsolete because everybody has a GPS. So the GPS tells you how to get to where you're going. So So, and they, what's that? Yeah, until the batteries run out. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I hope that maps don't become obsolete, because I like to pick my route, because I don't like to drive in heavy traffic. So, um, sometimes I'll take a longer route than the GPS tells me to take, because I notice I notice that's running through. If you go to the Metroplex, my and taking my mother down there, she always tells me I don't want to drive over the loop-de-loop, she calls it. So she does not like taking that mix master, or whatever they call it. She does not want to be on that. So. So, okay. Depends on the time of the day, I guess. So, anyway, uh, so just because the GPS picks a certain route, not everybody may not want to take that route. But you're right, it'll probably replace maps, and people like me that want to pick our own route. Yeah, everybody will just rely on GPS. So the idea is, as new technology comes along, the old becomes obsolete. But what happens to people that worked in those industries? Yeah, they wound up losing their jobs. But some people argue that we need to protect those jobs, but if we did, we'd still be listening to vinyl records. So even though we'd have these people being paid and produce vinyl records, yet we want to have MP3s. So in the long run, they need to find a different line of work. So something that there's a demand for. And a few last things that are in this chapter on page 33. Gains from specialization and division of labor. If you read The Wealth of Nations, one of the first items that Adam Smith talked about was the division of labor. And he said the reason for the Industrial Revolution, in large part, was because of the division of labor. And he goes on to talk about the production of pins, PIN type of pins. And he tells in The Wealth of Nations that one person working alone, they can produce only a few in a day. It'd be a lot of work. There's a lot. He talked about each separate, distinct step. I don't remember how many different steps there are involved, but there's a changeover involved in you as you go from one process to another. So one person working by themselves, they can only make a few in a day. But if you have 10 men that are working together, and each one specializes in a different step, how many can they make in a day? Between all 10 of them, well, 48,000 pins. So that comes to the end of the day when they count out the pins to share them with one another for their work. They all go home with 4,800 pins. So is that a big increase in production? Yeah, that's a spectacular increase in production, isn't it? But along with that division of labor, we have to have markets, right? Because does each one of those guys working at the pin factory all need 4,800 pins every day? No, they need a marketplace where they can go to and sell their pins and purchase the products that they need, right? So specialization and division of labor is important. Also, comparative advantage. That's an important concept. This is something originated by David Ricardo in the earlier part of the 1800s. The law of comparative advantage states that the total output of a group of individuals, an entire economy, or a group of nations will be greatest when the output of each good is produced by the person or firm with the lowest opportunity cost for that good. So here again we have this concept of opportunity cost. So whoever has the lowest opportunity cost. Now, if you don't think about this, you may say, well, whoever's best at producing it should produce the item. Well, yeah, not necessarily, right? So, second paragraph from the bottom there on page 33 gives you a case where not necessarily the person that's best at that job should be doing that job. Andrea, she's an attorney. She makes $100 an hour for doing legal work. She's also a really great typist, and she has some typing that needs to be done, and she could do it in 20 hours. Or she can hire somebody to type it, and somebody's not near the typist that Andrea is. It would take them 40 hours. But how much does that person earn? $15 an hour. So where is Andrea's comparative advantage? Typing or doing the legal work? Yeah, she needs to be concentrating on that legal work, right? Every hour that she's typing instead of doing the legal work is costing her. She makes $100 for doing the legal work and not so much typing. That doesn't pay that great, does it? So she needs to be doing the legal work. That's where her comparative advantage is at. Now, does she have what's called an absolute advantage at doing both the legal work and the typing? Yeah, she's better at the legal work, and she's also better at the typing. She can type twice as fast as the person that she's hiring. But the person that she's hiring, she doesn't have to pay them so much. So what's the best thing for her to do? Concentrate on the legal work and let the other person concentrate on the typing, even though she's better at the production of both. So she's got an absolute advantage, you could say. And the last thing in the chapter, economic organization. There's two basic ways, organized by markets or capitalism. Capitalism, an economic system in which productive resources are owned privately and goods and resources are allocated through market prices. And so we can use capitalism as a way to allocate goods and services. It works rather well. We can also use collective decision making or socialism, which is a system of economic organization in which one, the ownership and control of the basic means of production rests with the state, and two, resource allocation is determined by centralized planning rather than market forces. Well, we've already talked about this today, right? What method has done well over the years? Yeah, capitalism, right? Just think about some countries that are doing well today. United States, South Korea. There's a good one. Compare South Korea to North Korea. South Korea, you have capitalism. Yep, North Korea. Yep. You just need to look at the Korean Peninsula to see the difference, right? Has anyone ever seen a satellite image of the Korean Peninsula at night? Yeah, that's right. It's it's pitch black in North Korea at night. But if you look at South Korea, it's all lit up. There's people working there. So lots of things going on in South Korea, not so much in North Korea. It's just dark. So, yeah. So if you want to know which one works better, that's about as far as you need to look. You can also look at, different measures of how well countries are doing. North Korea, Cuba. Those countries that still practice communism, they're at the bottom of the list. Other countries, countries like Singapore and some other countries that don't have a wealth of natural resources, but the rules of the game that we've talked about today, they know what they need to be doing, and not only what they need to be doing, but what they need to not be doing to allow individuals to have economic freedom so that their economy grows. So, any questions about anything we've talked about today?